Well, thank you three for joining us to talk a little bit more about Hispanic Heritage Month and provide your insights on our growing Hispanic population here in Arizona, in particular with a couple of different spaces in the education space, in the workforce development space, and the economic development space. And Valley Leadership is very grateful to have three superstar community leaders here in Arizona joining us to talk a little bit more about that, including a former Woman of the Year, a former alumni, and Chris Camacho, a super strategic partner that helps us with all sorts of stuff. So welcome. Thank you, three. How has or does educational attainment impact generational growth in the Hispanic population? What is being done to improve access to this critical group within Arizona?
Thank you, Dave, for the invitation to be with my colleagues during this conversation today. Maria Harper-Marinick, and yes, I was Woman of the Year a few years back, and I was with the Maricopa Community College system for over 30 years, ending my tenure as a chancellor. Since I retired 2 years ago, I am a senior fellow with the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program and continue the work on providing access to opportunity in the higher ed ecosystem. And so the question of educational attainment is a critical question, not only for the Latino, the Hispanic population, is for everybody, but for us particularly because of our passion for that work. I think we all know that the vehicle, a way to lift whole families out of poverty is through education, and that providing access to affordable, high quality education at all levels of the educational system is critical for the attainment. You can't talk about attainment if you don't talk at the same time about access. Who's in, who's out, what are the barriers that are keeping people from entering at different points the educational system. So attainment is critical. Attainment of college degrees is critical, but the conversation actually at the national level has shifted from only attainment to, so what happens afterwards? You know, what I call the so what question. So our focus right now in the work in higher ed is what we're calling post-completion outcomes. So attainment for what purpose? And the purpose is to allow more people to have the competence and the skills and the opportunities, the social capital to apply and get the jobs that are paying a wage that is above just living wage. That education is the way for people to get access to better opportunities, new opportunities. So attainment is critical. Attainment alone is not enough. We need to look at the entire continuum and keep in mind the end goal needs to be employment, engagement in the community, and the prosperity of all the families that we serve.
Thank you, Maria. Same question to you, Chris, because I know you look at this pretty heavily in your own economic development work, and attainment is something that the state has wrestled with for years. What is your response to how that educational attainment impact generational growth in the Hispanic population here in Arizona? And again, some of the things you're seeing and hearing about what's being done to improve the access to it.
Sure. And Dave, you were correct in your introduction. I've never been Valley Leadership Woman of the Year. So with that said, there's no question that out. There is an inextricable link between educational attainment, GDP growth, and probably even more importantly, productivity growth within a regional economy. And as Maria so eloquently referenced, there is absolute need for us to continue to focus on achievement and having high standards for students, and that's all students. But if you look at how important the demographic shift that's underway is to our future economy, if you look in the last 10 years, the Metro Phoenix market's been one of the top growth markets for the 6th year in a row. And roughly 68% of that growth has been, population growth has been minorities new to the market, or minorities that are growing up in our community and are now becoming working age individuals. And so really critical as we look at how we make the right strategic investments across our P through 20 system. This is our next generation workforce. And whether you're talking about semiconductors or advanced electronics or electric vehicles or financial services or healthcare jobs, guess what? They're all in demand. the job market today is one of the most robust job markets I've seen in my 20 years. And we need to ensure that, again, all facets of access are being met. All schools have the requisite resources to produce students and having qualified teachers in the classrooms. And at the end of the day, if we all want to see a strong economy, which I think we all do, arguably more important, we need a healthy society. And education is the bedrock to ensure a healthy economy and healthy society.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, not Woman of the Year, but President, CEO of Greater Phoenix Economic Council. Thank you, Chris. So real quick, back to you, Stephanie, now, because this is a great segue into the work you've been doing. Talk a little bit more about the work you're doing when it comes to educational attainment, especially in the Latino community, and how it does ultimately link to this good society we need, and the strong, vibrant economy that we need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stephanie Parra, I'm the executive director at All In Education. I also serve on a local school board, the Phoenix Union High School District, and am a proud class 36, best class ever, because we have to say it. I think it's a requirement. Best class ever, 36, alum of VL. So very proud of that as well. And thank you for being here. Really grateful for the opportunity to be with my colleagues today. So a little bit more about the work of All In Education. We're a relatively young nonprofit in the education advocacy space, about 2.5 years old. And we were established to make sure that the communities that are most impacted by the inequities in the education system, reference both P20, right, both by Maria and Chris here, that those communities have access to decision-making rooms, and that as we are shaping conversations about what our community needs to be successful, that parents, caregivers, students, and those of us in the education space, that we're in the room helping to shape those decisions and those conversations. And so we are essentially building a pipeline of leaders in the Latino community, from parents and caregivers to emerging and established leaders, who can come to the table with our shared experience, lived experience and perspective, to better inform how the policies, practices, and programs that we're implementing are actually meeting the needs of our communities. And I'll give you an example. So our work with the Parent Educator Academy, which is now, in over 35 schools across Greater Phoenix and rural Arizona as well, will be in 4 different counties: Maricopa, Pima, and Yuma and Pinal counties. And what we're doing with the Parent Educator Academy is really giving parents the tools to understand how the American education system works. We work with a large population of Latino Spanish-speaking parents who this might be their first interaction with our education system, and it's very different to the one that they know and understand. And so we're giving them the tools to understand the system, the social capital that Maria mentioned, to be navigators and advocates on behalf of their students. And what we're seeing as a result of our programming is that parents are now more confident in speaking up and communicating with teachers in their school community. They're graduating with a sense of agency and confidence in their ability to be advocates for their kids. And, what we believe is our theory of change, if we're going to close the attainment gaps that exist for Latino students, our parents have to be a part of the solution. They have to be the resource and the partners that we need to close those gaps, because kids aren't at school 24/7, right? They're in the community, they're in their homes, and parents have to be partners in supporting the educational journey of their kids. And so I think that it's programs like that, something that we seeded, an idea that we built a couple of years ago, and it was our lived experience as Latino leaders in the education system that put this program together, because we know and understand what our parents went through when we were kids, right? We know and understand what they needed as a result of our own personal lived experience. And I think that's an example of what I mean when I say our lived experience, our perspective at the table is critical as we're shaping conversations about our education system, about our economy. Including those voices in the discussion is going to create better solutions for our community in the long run.
Awesome, and congratulations. I know a brand new group, but already having great impact. And as you know, Valley Leadership's pivot is all about impact. So back to you, Chris, just quickly talking about impact. How does the Hispanic population contribute to the economic growth in Arizona?
Yeah, if you've tuned in to any of the Datos reports in partnership with the Hispanic Chamber here in Arizona, you'll see that the significant amount of increased consumer spending is directly tied to the growth of the Hispanic Latino base in our community. So there's absolute ties to the level of economic activity that is being provided to our community. Now, if you draw that back, what's creating that economic or spending value? There's definitely a tie in terms of how we look at access to capital, ties to the entrepreneurial community within these populations. And so there's a lot of efforts underway that we're working with a number of CDFIs in our community, along with CPLC, Chicanos por la Causa, and other programs, really to further accelerate the early stage access to seed capital. This is a huge current barrier and limitation to the launch and startup of whether it's a service or product enterprise in the Latino community. And even retail for that matter. Some of the data that we have, Dave, suggests that very different from their counterparts, Latino business startups actually access capital through friends and family resources, or even their own bank accounts, much more notoriously than their non-Hispanic counterparts. And so again, this is a bootstraps kind of rolling up your sleeves approach, and whether it's retail or service companies. But again, if you look at the demographic shift that we've talked about in our community, fast forward 30 years, this economy is going to be either thriving or struggling on the backs of how minority businesses achieve success. And so again, while it might not be as popular to talk about today economically, what we've tried to do at Greater Phoenix Economic Council, whether it's partnerships with the Black Chamber or Hispanic Chamber, other minority chambers in our community, to bring to bear the limitations of access to capital, even some financial literacy needs, to ensure that these young companies that ideally will be our strengthened companies of the future are garnering the resources they need. And again, what excites me about all of this is we're in the first inning of a lot of this shift. And so we have the chance to paint the canvas appropriately to back what Maria said earlier. If we truly want prosperity for all of our residents, this is a very, very critical faction of this economic building or economy building. And so again, we're going to spend a lot of time, effort, and resource to ensure that we're focused on the entirety of the community. We have a specific focus today on South Phoenix, where a lot of the investments around the valley have gone to other areas. And yet, with the exception of the new light rail connectivity that's occurring down Central, we want to leverage transit-oriented development. We want to leverage the retail businesses, in those communities to ensure that they're strengthened. These neighborhoods have, further backbone support from the community, because again, this is really kind of back to the roots focus. And so I'm excited to play a small role in a lot of this, but the tremendous amount of care that's gone into the planning in South Phoenix and really all of Phoenix in the last decade. We're seeing the results, even going back to the education question. We've seen pretty substantial strides with groups like All in Education and others that have been advancing high school attainment and achievement, where we've seen 14-point gains in the last 20 years. But we can't become complacent that that's enough. We need to continue to ensure that the resources are placed within the communities of need. And again, that's what the business communities really become to recognize, that investments in the right strategic area is going to be better for the long-term economy.
Thank you, Chris. And to tie back this idea of nurturing the community, Maria, can you describe a little bit how did you nurture Hispanic leaders when you were chancellor at the Maricopa Community College District? And then how do you see that nurturing happening now, again, with the changing Phoenix demographic, the changing Arizona demographic, the growing population? what did you do, and what do you think needs to be done as we again nurture more and more Hispanic leaders as in their path to this good community in Arizona?
I'm going to ask that question in two ways, Dave. One way is literal response to the question, and that is how what I have done to nurture other leaders. Mm-hmm. And most people that know me know that I am a mentor, and that I have given freely of my time, my energy, my passion for the things that I believe matter to the community. So I do that. I continue to do that. So many times it's just a matter of validating people for who they are and what they bring to their positions. We don't get enough of that, but that's only a part of the response, because that alone doesn't create change. And I think what is important, going back to something that Stephanie said, is when we are given an opportunity to be in the room at the table, as I like to say, when we're given the microphone, we need to be ready to make those tough decisions. So the changes that were more impactful when I was chancellor in the community college system were not just the mentoring and the hiring. Now you have to diversify your workforce. That's one step too. That's not enough either to create equitable outcomes. Is when you're given that opportunity to be in a position to make critical decisions, you should be making those decisions through a lens of equity, and impacting policy and impacting real change. So I think the most impactful things I did were not only giving people the opportunity to demonstrate their potential in key positions, but it's also working on the policies, and some of the stuff you do very publicly, and some of that you do stealthily, because that's the political way to do those things. So to me, that's important. I will continue to do the mentoring, but what I really also want to mention is that, as Chris said, we've made some progress, and it's not even close to enough. So we have to avoid being complacent. So as leaders, not only Latino leaders, but anyone who views himself or herself as a leader in the community, we need to continue to be mindful of who's in and who's out. And what are we doing to make sure that all of this access to opportunity are available to all people? Affordability continues to be an issue. The basic needs of the people in the community that we serve and should serve continue to be an issue. So when people celebrate, metrics are going up and charts are changing in the positive direction, a lot of people are not given the same access to those opportunities. And we still have that same issue that we've had in the past. We have it today. It's not going to change unless we do something about it. During the pandemic, access to higher ed, for example, impacted disproportionately negatively Latino and Black Americans, African Americans. So what are we going to do about it? And a gain of 5% is not going to be enough. And not viewing the students as whole people, which is an issue that has become important to institutions of higher ed, you have to view your students as whole people. You have to address the needs for transportation, for housing, for food. Those are challenges, issues for institutions. You don't have the resources to do that. Consequently, partnerships are important, and that's where leadership comes into play. You have to worry about not only what you do inside your institution, but what impact you're having in the ecosystem and the community that you are responsible for providing access to opportunities. So that's a different conversation than we were having in the past, where, colleges are affordable because tuition is low. Tuition is, first of all, it's not really that low anywhere, and it's not enough. It's not enough. Affordability doesn't translate to tuition. There's a lot of other factors that come into play that allow people the opportunities or keep people out of opportunities. Last thing I will say as a leader is a lot of questions about whether or not people need to access college, and college is not for everybody. Those decisions need to be made by families. So informing, thank you, Stephanie, for all the great work you do in your parent academy. So informed decisions are important, and we have a responsibility, I believe, as a community to communicate the value proposition of going to college and why that matters. Not to you individually, not to me individually as an institution, to us as a collective, as a community.
Thank you, Maria. And that's something that's come up, I think comes up a lot, is this push and pull between a workforce that needs X and maybe generations old kind of idea that everybody should go to college. Chris, how are you seeing that play out in the economy, especially as jobs maybe have moved more into the STEM space, where there probably is a higher need to have more accreditation, more schooling? How do you see that push and pull happening?
Well, Dave, when you see unemployment sub 4%, that's a reflection that all jobs are in demand, whether it's, roofers and framers in a growing, residential community economy, or, the more mechanized, production line workers. There's absolute demand in that regard as well, to healthcare, which has been one of our largest industries and has been and will be for the future. So across the board, there's absolute need. But, again, how we shift our focus and preparedness, there's a lot of ideas for this education system that we need to ensure that we're building the proper access. But I think the point made earlier, I have conversations with major manufacturers, and just this last week, we had Secretary Raimondo in town on Tuesday talking a lot about the semiconductor sector, which most would believe that those are engineering jobs, senior, engineering demands. Well, there's thousands of jobs that are 2-year technical program jobs in precision manufacturing and technicians. There's other career technical education roles that each of those respective factories will house, and even probably broader than that, to the point about creating a new culture around education and industry. Making things is definitely a pivot our country is making that we should be very prideful of. We're shifting to making things again. Instead of importing goods from Asia, there should be a pride in our country about making products again. And as such, I think the challenge for industry and how that relates to workforce development, the pivot that's going to be required in workforce training is going to have a lagging effect. And what I mean by that is, it's not just overnight can we change high school curriculum or make more adaptive learning available, or even community colleges, which are very nimble, still difficult to meet the needs of again, a making things again economy, where I would argue we went for 30 or 40 years and saw the shift away from making goods to more of a service economy. And so to me, as we shift back as a country, my kids' generation, it's going to be required for really a P through 20 system to be much more nimble to not just the jobs in software engineering and in financial services and so forth, but the bulk of the middle class workforce is going to have to be retrained throughout their career. And again, how we shift community college mindset and other adaptive learning alternatives to build lifelong learners, that's going to be a very important shift for an economy like Phoenix. And again, the good news is, we have a lot of this underway, but the point that was made earlier, we're going to have to keep at this for a lot of years to continue to grow this economy. Because again, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there's intense competition for people across the country. And so how we build quality neighborhoods, all the way to how we build policy at the state level that makes a market welcoming and non-divisive, these are all things that are rolling into the health of an economy. And so again, that's why it takes all voices. And one other thing I'll finish with just on this question, when you think about the Hispanic purchasing power, like I talked about, the projection for 2022 is over $57 billion in Arizona. So I do believe we need to expand the voices of Hispanic and Latino leaders in our community to be on boards, and not just social services boards, economic boards and others, so that we talk about the core needs of all communities. And again, absent that, you're going to end up with largely a caste system where you have those that have made it and those that are left behind. And the economies are moving so quickly today. Think of Moore's Law and the shift in technology, how fast and rapid technology changes. The same thing are happening now in economies. The cycles are happening much more quickly than they ever did before. So again, I'm excited about the prospect of our future, but we can't be complacent, and we have to be very intentional about where we go directionally.
Dave, let me just say one thing before we move on. I think that shift has to be also how we view the educational system, because we still talk about it as Everything's an or propositions, college or workforce, college or technical. And I think we need to view education as not only part of the ecosystem in our society, but as a continuum of learning. Because there are many opportunities, especially through community colleges, for example, for technical education. That's also college. That's post-secondary training. So I think the how we talk about it and how we talk about it to families and how we talk about it to businesses, we also need to change our narrative about what we mean by attainment, by college, by post-secondary, and it is a continuum of learning. It cannot just be there's a stop and a start, and it's not that discrete, and it shouldn't be moving forward.
If I can jump in and add too, just from the high school perspective, so where I sit on the school board at Phoenix Union, this is a question that we get a lot, right? Is how are we providing opportunity to our kids in our community right now while they're in our schools? And I think we have to think beyond just the general education that we offered through 9 through 12, but how are we giving them access to early college enrollment, dual enrollment, certification programs, and setting them up for success? Because as Maria mentioned, once they get to post-secondary, it costs money, right? And these are families. So in Phoenix Union, and I share this stat often, but like our demographics have historically trended 10 years ahead of the city and 20 years ahead of the state of Arizona. And we are 90% students of color, almost 85% Latino. And unfortunately, almost 80% of our student population qualifies for free and reduced price lunch. We're a majority Title I school district. And what does that mean for the economy? And I think Chris hits on this often. If that's the future of Phoenix and the future of this state, our economy is not going to be in good shape. We have to, and that's why we go back to, I think all three of us harp on this. It has to be access for every single community to high wage jobs and skills, trades, college and certification programs that will give them those high wage positions, because they are the future of our community and of our economy. But I think we have to get creative about the opportunities that we offer while kids are in our system right now. And then simultaneously, and this is where the work with parents come in, is, one thing that we've seen as well is that when we are collaborating and working with parents as partners, they don't just increase their confidence in being able to help their kids, but they are seeing now a newfound sense of confidence in themselves. They're re-enrolling in college. They're applying for certification programs now as a result of being part of our program. And we're motivating them to reskill and re-enter the workforce in different ways. And that's it's those kinds of strategies and those kinds of conversations that are going to motivate our community to do not just well for their kids, but to do well for their whole families. And so that's kind of the spark of the what's possible when you give people opportunity.
Thank you, and that actually leads to the last question here. This idea you bring up, Stephanie, of how we do well. How we do well as a region, as a state. How do we do well as a Hispanic community? Valley Leadership very much about collaboration. Our whole Impact Makers model is based on collaboration, bringing people together of different backgrounds, different perspectives. You got to build trust. You got to be team mindset. All of our principles of doing. Question to start with you, Stephanie. How can Arizonans of different backgrounds come together to support the growth and success of the Hispanic community? You're closest to that community when you're working directly with grandmothers and grandfathers and fathers and the kids. How can Arizonans rally around what is this, the new population, what we're going to look like in 10, 20 years?
I would say I think my biggest kind of call to action for leaders and what folks can do is really not think about education or the economy or our community in silos, right? So when we advocate in silos, you're only advocating for the economy, you're only advocating for education, you're only advocating for housing, you forget that a community lives in a whole community. And what impacts the economy and impacts education and impacts housing and impacts healthcare, it's impacting families in a whole way. And so when we think about how are we going to solve for education, I joined you on Home Matters Arizona because I know that housing and access to affordable housing could potentially impact whether or not a kid is chronically absent at school. And if they're not in school, guess what? They're not learning. And if they're not learning, they're not getting to graduation. They're not going to be ready to enter college. They're not going to be ready to get to the workforce. So again, I think we have to break down the silos that exist in advocacy and come together around collective, collaborative solutions where it's those of us who are advocating for a stronger, healthier economy, that we're also advocating for stronger, healthier families and a stronger, more vibrant education system. It's all one community. And so that would be my call to action is let's think about our efforts as a collective rather than, just one single issue.
Thank you, Chris. Same question.
Stephanie, nice setup there. That was great. I do think you think about like the Arizona We Want work, the Gallup polling that they've conducted, pretty clear blueprint of what Arizonans want. They want quality education, high quality neighborhoods, access, all the things that we all want for our kids and grandkids one day. And to me, as a business leader, that we talk a lot about the needs of our community, but I still argue we need a roadmap. We need the roadmap that we can all commit to across the broader community that has clarity of expectation. And I think we're getting there. We launched something back in November that was called Convening the Community series around these 10 economic imperatives. And it was really to set the stage for what I hope will be the next chapter of Arizona's economy. But to Stephanie's point, this can't be done in a vacuum. It's not just about economic outcomes in terms of growing the top line gross domestic product. It's about, are all Arizonans accessing a piece of that prosperity and all the facets that go into it. So to me, we need the business community and the civic community, the philanthropic community, to be rowing in a direction. You're always going to have overlaying politics on top of that. But to me, it's the region needs to define what we want to become and be steadfast in an intentional vision and work with groups like Valley Leadership and other partners, to shepherd those plans. And kind of one part of that, I do believe the corporate community needs to be activated around pilots and programs that are effective. And whether that's All in Education and the Parent Academy, or whether it's Elevate AZ, the programs that are truly having the wraparound service support that create induced outcomes, that's what business community leadership wants. They want ROI-driven programming. And the more I think that we can rely on the corporate and business and civic community to help support those efforts, why we're all advocating against a roadmap, that's where I think we have to go as a market. And again, absent that, we don't know which direction we're going. We're just blowing with the wind and managing the economy. And so instead, I'd like to, have the broader market come together, work together, because I do believe we are very collaborative in this region and in the state, but really drive for excellence. And there's a chance for this regional economy and regional market to be one of the top 10, both innovation-centered, accessible, and even inclusionary economies of anywhere in the country over the next 30 years. It's our choice whether we want to embrace the right strategic decisions to get us there. And I think it's incumbent upon all these organizations to advance the cause or sit it out. I mean, it should be that direct. And to me, that's what it's going to take for market leadership to advance a strengthened economy for all.
Thank you, Chris. Maria, I want to go to you, but just want a quick plug for our 5 guiding principles of doing, but in particular that driven to do principle. Do something small or large, but do it. Maria, you have the final thought here when it comes to leadership, and it comes to our alumni, when it comes to our men and women of the year, when it comes to the new 107 plus catalyzed cohort members that just started their leadership journey last night. What do you offer? How do we come together? How do we think about how we can support the Hispanic community, again, for the good and the goodwill of the entire community?
Well, everything that Stephanie said and everything that Chris said, I would say exactly the same. And I think we're pretty good. You said that, Chris, as coming together and wanting to be collaborative. I think many of us know the importance of the work for collective impact. I think we do well in the collective. I'm not sure we do as well on the impact side of things. I think that we historically in the year, I've been in Arizona 40 years now, and we've many efforts throughout the decades of coming together for common cause and identifying goals and identifying potential solutions. What I don't see typically is the actions that are being taken. So you mentioned, you used the word doing, and I think that that's a word I had written down, that we need to follow the wonderful roadmaps and the collective thinking with action plans that actually give someone agency to do things that are inclusive of accountability systems and methods, so that somebody's responsible if things get done or things do not get done, that we do that with the community, not to the community, not for the community, that we are ready to include and equally respect all the voices that need to be part of the solution. These are not single, simple issues. They're complex. So consequently, the solutions cannot be single and simple solutions. But the main concern for me is where's the action, you know, and who's responsible when we say, oh, we had a plan with attainment goals for 2025 or 2030, and we get to 2030 and we are not where we need to be, and coming together to say, oh, we haven't done it, but we have all this goodwill. We have a lot of willing people. I think we need to be a bit more brave about taking action and keeping people accountable when things don't get done. That, to me, that needs to be a part of the equation.
Well, thank you all again for joining us and helping us celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Continue to be the exemplars of leadership. For those of you that want to learn more about Valley Leadership, you can visit our website. There you can find information about our programming, but also ways you can get involved through our Impact Maker, and lead on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, my colleagues.